Good morning, everyone. Good morning, my friends from Oak Park, Huntington Woods, Berkley, and beyond. Thank you for getting up so early this morning to come hear our keynote speaker, Mr. Stephen Henderson, who I think just walked away for a minute, to honor Joanne and Scott Sayre, to network and schmooze with your fellow stakeholders, drink a phenomenal cup of coffee by Detroit Bold, brought to you by A.J. O'Neill, and eat a delicious hot breakfast from Annabelle Cook's Catering, and do so in such an amazing event space as Specialty Showroom. Thank you for wanting to learn more about the coalition and prevention. Thank you for wanting to know how you can become the change agent that makes the difference in our community. And thank you for wanting to keep our youth and community healthy. Before I go any further, I'd like to recognize all of our elected officials in the room, some very new to us, only days old, and those who have been here a very long time. First, let me introduce the longest-standing Oakland County Mayor, Mayor Ron Gillum from Huntington Woods. The Berkley Mayor, Dr. Phil O'Dwyer. The Mayor of Oak Park, Marion McClellan. Our County Commissioner, Helene Zach. Judges Michelle Friedman-Apple, David Gubo, and Jamie Wittenberg. Our current state representative, Ellen Kogan-Lipton, could not be here this morning, but she's represented by Barbara Winter. Barbara, where are you? Thank you. Our newly elected state representative-elect, Robert Wittenberg. Berkeley City Councilman Alan Kadekel and Jack Blanchard. Oak Park City Councilman Paul Levine. Huntington Woods City Commissioners Bob Paul and Jeff Jenks. And Jules Olsman is represented by Barbara Bound. Barbara, where are you? Oh, is she somewhere? I know, I checked her in. Two Oak Park School Board trustees are here as well, Menachem Hoyda and Mildred Warren. And last, but certainly not least, Amanda York representing Congressman Sander Levin's office. Where are you, Amanda? She should be here. I'd also like to recognize the TCC board members, both past and present, and have come out this morning. Kevin Friedrich, president of the TCC, sitting right here. Beverly Barra, past president and current secretary. Our members at large, Carrie Hebert, Susie Potter, Angela Taub, Ben Weinberg, and Robert Wittenberg. Angela Diggs-Jackson, Jeff Jenks are two past presidents of the TCC, and Jeff Apple and Barry Lepler are former board members. They are also here this morning. Please raise your hand or stand or something so we can give you a round of applause. Thanks, Barry. Thanks, Jeff. So changes in the air this year for the TCC. We have a new program director. She's smart, kind, wonderful, fabulous, calm, level-headed, and exceptional at whatever she undertakes. She's our organizational guru as well as our in-house handy woman with a full toolkit with every tool imaginable. So far, there is nothing that she can't do and do well. Are you getting the picture? I'm crazy about her, and you will be too. Her name is Regina Hollingshead. Please stand, Regina. Let me also introduce you to a father of four, a business owner of an Avis rental car dealership, a pastor of 2 churches, Mr. Corey James, Pastor Corey James. He's also a certified Toastmaster, and he will be today's MC. So Corey is right there. He just raised his hand. How he keeps it all together and also is our beloved youth director of the U group, I'll never know. But he does so beautifully. Corey is also a social worker and presently is mentoring our social work intern from Oakland University, Dana Oker. Dana, please stand. Where are you? Dana is not only a student and our intern, but is a professional photographer and total computer website whiz kid. How did I get so lucky to be working with all of these wonderful, talented, and supportive people? I don't know, but I'm very appreciative and thankful. Increases in staff are not the only increases that are in the air for the TCC. Our DFC grant funding runs out in 2 years, and so we are actively working to build our sustainability by increasing our bank account. Thanks to the many wonderful donations from folks like you, our yearly fundraisers, and our participation in community events, we are making this happen. Recently, we were recognized as one of 31 other organizations across the country, the only one in Michigan and the only one that deals with substance abuse, to possibly win $30,000. You can come sit here. While there are many votes between us and the number 1 slot, it's important that we finish in the top 10 so that we can gain more exposure by being featured on the Aetna website. So if you haven't voted already, when you came in, will you please make sure to see Regina on your way out or sometime during the morning to cast your vote.
How fast can you vote, Judy?
You can vote every day on Facebook and Twitter and Google and Yahoo and what else am I missing? Every day. The other night, I had the pleasure, which I have often, of reading a book to our grandchildren, Selah and Jonah, before putting them to bed. I read them the story of the little engine that could. Are you familiar with that story? It's about a little train that is asked to perform a huge task, but is doubtful of its own power because of the smallness of its capacity. The little engine is trying to get over the mountain, pulling a huge load, and repeats to itself, I think I can, I think I can, I think I can. And lo and behold, the message that it tells itself is the strength that helps the little engine get over the mountain. In other words, it envisions itself able to chug itself up and over the mountain, and therefore accomplished its task. I thought about that story after I put our grandchildren to bed and likened it to the work that we do at the Coalition. We are small, we have little capacity as a nonprofit, but over the past almost 15 years that I've been with the organization, we have told ourselves, we think we can, we think we can, we think we can, and lo and behold, we have accomplished a lot, but we have a ways to go. Our power is working, but we are still chugging along, envisioning our power that will change the culture about drugs and alcohol. Regina and I, along with my husband, Bobby, who was very gracious about going with me, attended a lecture last week entitled, Who's Shopping in Your Medicine Cabinet? By a former DEA agent, Bob Stutman. His message was truly profound and shocking and gave me information that I thought would be important to share with all of you here this morning. He said, in all of my experience, I have learned 3 absolute facts. which many Americans fail to understand. First, law enforcement will never make drugs completely unavailable in the United States. Second, most adults know almost nothing about the world of kids and drugs. How many of us know about what Special K is or roofies are? And third, drugs are devastating our communities, homes, and workplaces, and we are failing to deal with this in a way that will make any substantial change. Every day in the United States, 114 people die as a result of a drug overdose, and another 6,800 are treated in emergency departments for the misuse or abuse of drugs. Presently, antidepressants are responsible for more overdose deaths than cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, and amphetamines combined. Deaths from drug overdose have been rising steadily over the past 2 decades and now have become the leading cause of injury death in the United States. For the first time in history, automobile accidents are the second cause of death by accident in the United States, the first now being prescription drug abuse. Kids that are using these drugs have no idea what they are taking and don't know that there is no room for mistakes. These drugs are lethal, especially if they are mixed with alcohol, which they do frequently. Our children are dying at alarming rates, and we are basically doing nothing. By survey, almost 50% of the teens believe that prescription drugs are much safer than illegal street drugs. Why do you think? Anyone? Because they are prescribed by a doctor. And 60 to 70% of teens say that home medicine cabinets are their source of drugs. On 9/11, over 3,000 people died due to terrorist attacks, and we have elaborate and hopeful plans of preventing such attacks again. Yet more than 3,000 people die every month due to the effects of illicit drug use, and most families have no plan in place as to how to deal with the problem. Instead, they use "not my kid" as a defense. Most school systems are doing less than they were in 1985 because they don't have the time or money to deal with this, which unfortunately in Michigan is due to major budget cuts in education. Most businesses, while they think they are dealing with the problem of substance abuse in the workplace, spend money on programs that rarely make a difference, such as pre-employment testing. Lately, we are all frightened about Ebola, scared that we are going to contract this deadly disease, when in reality the numbers in the United States are quite low, and we are working around the clock to treat and eliminate this horrible virus. But what are we actually doing to save the 400,000 people who think that because a doctor or dentist prescribed this pill, this opiate, that it is safe to take and nothing will happen? So, where does this all leave us? It was not my intention to put the burden on any one group or point a finger at our community and say, shame on you. I am here to ask for your help, to ask you to join the TCC in a call to action. We can be the voice of all the children that have died. We can talk to our doctors and dentists and ask why they prescribe so many narcotics. We can dispose of our drugs in a proper manner when we are no longer taking them. We can educate ourselves about the dangers of prescription drugs. We can be more vigilant and careful. We can speak to our legislators about making changes to federal regulations that are urgently needed to facilitate effective prevention, treatment, and management of opiate addiction and overdose, and more simply, we can lock up our drugs. We can envision our community as a safer place, a well place, a place where our kids know they're valued and loved and looked after. Help me lead the TCC's engine up and over the mountain. Let me be the resource for you, to be the parents, the schools, and the community, to think we can. I think we can. I truly believe that if we envision our future, if we envision our capabilities, if we envision our power as an organization, then we can make ourselves get over that huge mountain of fear and denial, that we can reduce drug and alcohol use in our community. We can save some lives. Thank you. I'd like to, thank you. I'd like to now turn the podium over to our Toastmaster and MC, Corey James, who will tell you about our 2 wonderful youth chapters and their plans for 2015. Thank you. Corey?
Can we give Miss Judy Rubin a hand, please? And I would like to say that the staff, we are very fortunate to work with someone who is so passionate about the cause of keeping our community safe and keeping our kids off of drugs. So one more time, can we please thank Miss Judy Rubin? Before I talk about the YOU, I wanted to say that I'm very excited to announce that I was able to speak with our newly elected state rep, Mr. Robert Wittenberg, this morning, and he wanted to let me know that he's already planned his first 90 days in office, which means that he's decided that he's going to give one of these lovely kitchen sets to one of you lucky recipients, courtesy of our new state rep, Mr. Robert Wittenberg. Yes. And if he doesn't uphold the agreement, then Judge Wittenberg will be able to assist you in getting your new kitchen set. Yes. Every day, I have the opportunity to work with some amazing young people in both Berkley and Oak Park high schools. And our assignment is to teach kids how to succeed without using drugs and alcohol and how to make good choices. And so I would like for all of our YOU students that are here to please stand from both Oak Park and Berkley high schools. Can you please give them a hand? Thank you. You see in these group of students the next president, the next lawyers, the next doctors, the next judges. So I'm very fortunate to be able to work with them. But I also want to thank those who allow us the opportunity to work with them, and that is Dr. Colbert, the superintendent of Oak Park Schools, Principal Stevens, high school principal. And I certainly couldn't do what I do without Ms. Lacano, who is our faculty advisor at Oak Park High School. Where is she? And then also I want to certainly thank Principal Gall over at Berkley High School for letting us come to Berkley. The faculty advisor there, Ms. Robin Weiss, thank you so much for your assistance. And of course, I want to thank Mr. Ross, who is the new principal at Henderson. Thank him so much for working with us last year as well as this year. At this time, I want to introduce Mr. Bob Paul, who is going to come and present our presentation for the Power of One Award. Mr. Bob Paul.
Good morning. We have a short microphone here, Judy. When Judy Rubin contacted me to see if I would be willing to pass the baton, so to speak, and present the Power of One Award this year to Joanne and Scott Sayre, I was honored to have the opportunity to recognize such a well-deserving couple. To step back just a moment, for those of you who are not familiar with this award, It began a few years ago when Rochelle Riley, a colleague of Mr. Henderson's, was our keynote speaker at this event and shared a story with us about how one person's dream and drive can accomplish a tremendous amount. We are taught that having the vision to reach a more perfect environment and taking it one step at a time can change the world. Joanne and Scott Sayre have had this vision of a more perfect community and have taken the steps to make it happen, and that is why they have been chosen to receive the Power of One Award for 2014. Scott and Joanne met at Campbell Ewall back in 1985, where they were both working after graduation. They moved to Huntington Woods in January of 1987, and then along came what they would tell you are their most proud accomplishment and greatest rewards, being the parents of 3 wonderful young women, Allison, Haley, and Kelly. They became very involved in the community over the years, including a list, and not limited to this list, chairing the 4th of July games and races, T-ball coaching, Girl Scout leadership, Burton Elementary School field day chair people, market day chair people, ice cream social chair, junior hoopers coach for Berkley Hoops, soccer coaches, 4th of July parade chair, sharing and caring annual food donation chair, serving on the Hurricane swim team board, and on and on and on. And the amazing part about it is, when you get one of them to agree to volunteer, you usually get both. Are you beginning to see the big picture here? Volunteers extraordinaire. And I haven't even gotten to the Tri-Community Coalition yet. I've had the pleasure of working alongside these great people in many community efforts, but one that stands out the most is the Tri-Community Coalition's Swinging for Scholarships Golf Classic. They have done everything for this event, from all the planning meetings, coordinating schedules with the golf course and the caterer, recruiting golfers and volunteers, soliciting gifts for our silent auction, setting up the morning of the outing, producing and printing the program, running the entire silent auction from printing bid forms to closing the tables and helping with checkout. And at the same time, Team Sayre always registers a foursome to play in the outing as well. And they've won it a couple times. If memory serves me right, I believe they're our defending champions right now. Scott and Joanne also serve on the committee that decides the annual recipients of our golf outing scholarship. The Tri-Community Coalition is lucky to have these 2 wonderful people, and the community is equally as lucky to have their passion, organizational skills, dedication, and work ethic on our side. I didn't tell you that Scott grew up in East Lansing and is a fellow graduate of Michigan State University. Go Green. He drank the green and white juice at a very early age, as his dad was an offensive coach for the Spartan football team as well as teaching at the university. And Joanne, although a graduate of Oakland University, became a loyal Spartan fan through marriage and earned accreditation as a master gardener through Michigan State University. So I'm very proud to be able to keep the Power of One Award in the Spartan family for another year. Scott and Joanne, thank you for all your volunteer efforts, your commitment to the community and to your family, and most of all, for being the solid citizens, roll up your sleeves, help where help is needed type of people that you are. Please come up and accept our Power of 1+1 Award from the Tri-Community Coalition.
Thank you very much for this award. Now I'm going to speak and probably disappoint all of you. Our participation with the TCC and the annual golf outing has been a group effort. Bob Paul, Bob Sheldon, Jules Olsman, Alan Droz all do a great job of fundraising. Rick Tripp, who originally approached Scott about participating, has done a fantastic job of spearheading the golf outing. And of course, Judy Rubin is the MVP as the leader of Tri-Community Coalition. But thanks to all the golfers, donors, and participants of the TCC. We'd like to give a shout out to our favorite daughter, Haley, who is here with us today while her two sisters are in Philadelphia. The true reward for our participation is the opportunity to impact Berkeley and Oak Park students. If our participation gives a student a chance to wait even one more day before they take a drink or try a substance, then that is one more day toward a more mature decision. And if the golf outing scholarships give a student a chance for a better future, we are a success. And that is our true reward. So thank you for the Power of 1+1 award, and thank you for supporting the Tri-Community Coalition.
I just want to say real quick, anybody that lives in this area, the recurring theme this morning is community. When you live here, you very much feel like you're a part of a community. Those of you that have kids, those of you that have had substance abuse problems in your families before can all relate to this. It really is very easy to get involved and be a part of this. So what Bob said is very accurate. One of us ends up getting asked to do something and we do it together. It's a great opportunity and we appreciate it. We're humbled by the opportunity to be a part of it. So thanks.
Sometimes there are not words to describe how you feel. So you just have to sometimes hum how you feel. Da 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 da. Feel better now. Go blue. Yes. Let's get that straight. Congratulations, but let's get that straight. At this time, I'm going to introduce and bring to the lectern Kevin Friedrich, who is our TCC board president. Can you please give him a hand as he comes?
I am here with the distinct pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker today, Mr. Stephen Henderson from the Detroit Free Press. Stephen Henderson is a Detroit native and has been the editorial page editor for the Free Press since January 2009. He currently lives in Detroit with his wife Christine and their two children, Oscar and Eleanor. Prior to working at the Free Press, Stephen was a reporter, editorial writer, and editor at the Baltimore Sun, the Chicago Tribune, the Lexington, Kentucky Herald Leader, and the Knight Ridder Washington Bureau, where he covered the U.S. Supreme Court from 2003 to 2007. Henderson hosts a weekly talk show, American Black Journal, and co-hosts the weekly news wrap-up show, My Week. Both can be seen on Detroit Public Television. Henderson's work has been honored with more than a dozen national awards, including the 2014 Pulitzer Prize for commentary. His assessment of Detroit's financial collapse questioned Detroit's elected officials' fiscal management policies, gave readers an eye-opening look at the city's history and an optimistic plan for recovery. Paul Anger, Free Press editor and publisher, said, "As a community, we need effective leadership in so many ways, and I think Steve has been a very strong voice and leader in his own right." So please help me welcome Stephen Henderson to the podium.
Thank you. One thing that's not in my bio is that I spent 2 years as a member of the Michigan marching band in Ann Arbor. If I had known you were giving awards to Spartans, I might have said no. Find somebody else to speak. I'm really grateful that I was asked to speak this morning. It does seem that ever since I've had this job, I've been asked to speak after the election every year. And it really depends on what year it is, to what kind of reception I get. In 2008 and 2012, people were in great moods and loved our endorsement of President Obama. In 2010 and in 2014, this year, I've had different kinds of receptions to to what we did. So it is ironic that it's just 3 days ago we all went to the polls to choose our elected leaders for the next 2 or 4 years. Up and down the ballot, the theme was leadership in Lansing and in Washington. And by the literal definition, the people we chose will lead us. They'll make decisions, and they'll set the course. They'll define the contours and the nature of our government. But how many of them are actual leaders in the less literal and maybe more spiritual sense? How many of them will inspire us? And how many of them would we follow anywhere? How many of them would have the mettle to go their own way against settled expectations to do what they believe is right? For me, that last question gets to the heart of leadership. The tough decision made in the face of stern, intimate opposition, maybe even under duress, is the one that tests and shapes the real leaders among us. The best examples of leadership are profiles in courage. So often for me, the people who best exemplify that have done their work outside the halls of power and in relative obscurity. And I'll be more than happy to talk about the things that are going on in this community now after the speech with some questions, but I did want to talk about sort of the arc of my career and the things that I've experienced. And the great thing about life as a newspaper person is the chance to tell other people's stories and to document acts of courage and leadership all over the country. And I wanted to share some of the people that I've experienced with you this morning. My first job out of college was reporting for the Herald Leader in Lexington, Kentucky. I loved it, loved how different the geography and culture and people were there, and I spent a lot of time out in the coal counties, the eastern part of the state, where poverty and isolation gripped daily life like a vice. This was some 22 years ago, when the state had just passed a sweeping education reform bill that aimed to empower teachers and principals and parents in a way that would transform their schools. School staffs were supposed to be building councils to implement the new law, and I was assigned to see how things were progressing in Pulaski County, which is a fairly remote place in southeast Kentucky. That's where I met Nelva Fitzgerald, who was a fairly unassuming first grade teacher who turned out to have a spine of steel and a tenacious thirst for justice. Nelva had tried to put her school in the forefront of the reforms, but her principal hadn't thought it was such a great idea. He feared that he would lose power under the new system, so he undermined her efforts and, at the end of the school year, assigned her to teach a grade that was outside her early elementary school specialty. As she told me several times, he wanted to teach her a lesson, and he wanted to send a message to other teachers who might be thinking of embracing the new law. But Nelva didn't back down. She fought the principal through the state's reform office and got a monitor appointed to the county to be sure that change was voted on and implemented. The whole incident inspired other teachers to step forward and tell similar stories about Nelva's principal and other administrators in the school district. Change came to Pulaski very slowly, and Nelva Fitzgerald was eventually returned to the first grade classroom where she could make the difference she was trained and educated to make. That's leadership, quiet, steady, and not at all attention-seeking. But it's the kind of leadership that I have found moving and inspiring. I talked to Nelva Fitzgerald, in fact, just a couple of months ago, randomly. She called me. She had seen that I had won the Pulitzer Prize this year and wanted to congratulate me. And she is still teaching 22 years later in the first grade classroom that I first saw her in Kentucky. I had a similar experience in Baltimore, Maryland, when I began writing in early 2000 about a death row prisoner named Eugene Colvin-L. Eugene had been convicted of murdering an elderly woman in the Baltimore suburbs, and his trial had been a horrific joke. The state-appointed lawyer called no witnesses and barely challenged what was pretty flimsy evidence that he'd committed the crime. Nonetheless, Colvin-L was convicted and sentenced to death. But then a young lawyer named John Morris was assigned to handle Colvin-L's appeals. He reviewed the case and the evidence and concluded that there hadn't been nearly enough to convict his client. He worked for 16 years, filing appeals, making arguments, and trying to get his client a new trial. Mostly the efforts went nowhere. Many other lawyers, and certainly those in the prosecutor's office, believed strongly in Colvin-L's guilt, and appeals courts kept agreeing with those lawyers over and over and over. But Morris persevered and stuck with the case, every time winning enough delay in Colvin-L's execution date to file another objection. And in 2000, when the Maryland governor scheduled an execution date, Morris' work finally paid off. A number of media outlets detailed all the problems with Eugene Colvin-L's conviction. I was one of them, writing editorials for the Baltimore Sun. And the governor finally commuted Colvin-L's sentence to life in prison, saying he wasn't certain enough of the inmate's guilt to sign a death warrant. I remember the tears streaming down Morris's face and the halt in his voice as we talked about what the governor had done. And I remember thinking about what it took for him to work that case that long for little pay and for no thanks for such a long time. Again, it's leadership, the kind of thing I've found really attractive and inspiring in people throughout my career. Of course, my career brought me back home to Detroit in 2007 and brought back memories of the great leaders I knew here as a child and as a young reporter. People like Eleanor Jositis and William Cunningham, the founders of Focus Hope, and early prodders of us at U of D Jesuit High School to make the most of our talents for the needy. And there was my uncle, William Beckham Jr., whose quiet resolve and insistence on making the right choice, no matter how difficult, was a real beacon for me. Another irony, his 74th birthday would have been today. One of the most important things I learned from my Uncle Bill was about the importance of truth-telling, and not just the easy kind. It can be really simple, for instance, to indulge the cliched idea of, quote, speaking truth to power, especially when the powerful aren't the people you work with or live with. Distant courage is no courage at all. What really matters is what you do close in, with those people you love and trust, and the community that you call yourself a part of. For my Uncle Bill, that meant standing up to the elected school board in Detroit, for instance, and clamoring for painful, unpopular change at a turbulent time. And when the critics called him names, we've all heard them before, he said what mattered was what he answered to, not what people called him. I say that all the time. It matters what you answer to, not what people call you. That kind of leadership is hard to come by. In my uncle's absence, in my uncle's absence, it has been even harder to replicate. I think that's one of the things that we have been missing in Detroit for a long time, is that kind of courage to speak the truth to one another. The situation that we find ourselves in with the bankruptcy is probably the paramount example. This has been coming for, as we've pointed out in the paper, almost 60 years. The spiral downward, the lack of courageous decision-making, and now we find ourselves at the lowest point, trying to get back up, and still we have members of our community unwilling to sort of face the truth and do the hard things. But more important here in Detroit, I've become familiar with another kind of leadership, something I'm seeing now through the lens of the West Side Detroit neighborhood where I was born, in Old St. Cecilia's Parish around Livernois and Grand River. I've begun thinking about what my obligation or commitment to that area should be, now that the house where I was born is abandoned and stripped, blighting a neighborhood that has been hard hit by population loss, economic isolation, and despair. My instinct has been to say that my connection there amounts to a call to action. And I'm trying now to take the house and make it into something productive. I'm also working with other nonprofits in the area to figure out how we can take something that has sunk so low and turn it in another direction. But that journey has brought me into contact with the people who have stayed in that neighborhood all these years, the ones holding what little is left together and hoping to be joined by people like me in their work to make things better. People like Reverend Parker, who's the pastor at St. Cecilia, who's seen the congregation shrink and his school close, but who still perks up at the idea of possible investment in the area and would never ever think of leaving. And there are people on the block where I was born who have been there their whole lives, many who have never experienced the kind of opportunities I had, but who stay, committed to the idea that this place has value and potential and that things will someday get better. Folks in the neighborhood have started to see me enough around to know which house I live in, and they've begun to ask whether I'm going to take it back, whether I might do something with it. In a way, it's their leadership that's pulling me back. They have courage, they have stamina, and their beliefs have kept them steady in a declining neighborhood for decades. Whatever I do, it's their leadership that will matter for them and for the whole city. Thank you. I'd be happy to take any questions. Where do you keep your Pulitzer Prize? That's actually a good story. I was really surprised in April when the Pulitzer announcements came out and my name was on the list. I literally, I had not even planned to come into work that day, and I had sort of slept in at 1 or 2 o'clock to just sort of clean some stuff up, and I was sitting at my computer, and I thought, oh, you know, Pulitzer announcements today, I should go look to see if anyone I know has won. And I went to the Pulitzer website, and as the page was loading, I could hear in the newsroom downstairs this tremendous roar go up, and it startled me, and I thought, oh, maybe we won something. And then I looked at the page, and I saw my name there. So it was a really stunning sort of moment. And I have had a hard time. I'm not somebody who likes a lot. I mean, for a guy who has a newspaper column and 2 television shows, I'm not someone who likes a lot of attention. And I am a pretty private person. And so I've struggled with the whole public side of that. And the prize itself has been sort of a conundrum for me. And so right now it's still in the box that it came in, and that box is in a suitcase I bought that I put all of the things related to the Pulitzer in, and I've had to buy a second box to hold the letters that people have sent me. Lots of people sent emails and things, but I was surprised by the number of people who sat down and wrote with a pen and paper or a computer, wrote letters and put them in the mail. I am still going through them to respond and thank people. So those are also in the box. But someday I will figure out where the prize might fit into my world. Right now, I'm comfortable with it in the box. Sure. Will Detroit have enough money after bankruptcy to improve essential services, and what's the solution for a large city in area but a relatively small population? Well, that's a simple question. The idea of bankruptcy, and most people who've ever sort of had any experience with it know this, the idea is to restructure your debt and free up cash to be able to spend on essentials. And that part of the bankruptcy seems to have worked. We have shed about $10 billion, we think, worth of the city's debt, or restructured it. And the current estimates are that we'll have about $100 million more each year to spend on essential services. That, of course, is a drop in the bucket when you're thinking about the things that need to be done, when you think about the lack of police service and fire service, the lighting and the infrastructure problems that we have. So it's more money. It's not enough. There's going to have to be some significant more investment in the city for us to really sort of change the nature of the neighborhoods in particular. I think the ultimate solution, really, there's no other way. The only way to really get the city back on its feet is to increase the population. And it's not just any population. We need middle-class families to move back into the city. That doesn't mean, sometimes when I say that, people say, well, you're trying to get rid of the poor people. In fact, that's not the case at all. It's that poverty in Detroit has become a lot like rural poverty as opposed to urban poverty in the way that it's isolated. You have vast stretches of very, very deep poverty, very disconnected from any sort of middle class or upper class enclaves. And so they struggle in a way that you would see in rural areas where poverty takes hold. For a city to work, you've got to have income earners up and down the economic ladder. The taxes in a city are paid by middle-class families and businesses. And those are the two things that we have lost more of over the last 40 years than anything else. I don't see a way for the city to survive without some replenishment of those two categories of people. And I think the new mayor is working real hard on that. He said something I wouldn't have said, which was that he thinks the population will be going up within 4 years. I think that would be an absolute miracle. But if we can at least stop the outflow, I think that's a beginning. Did you change your mind regarding the failure of the EAA, or do you still think we have to give it a chance to prove itself? So the EAA, for those who don't know, is a recovery district that the governor and it was really the governor, came up with for the 15 worst performing schools in Detroit. We initially were somewhat excited about the idea. Other states have tried this. If you go to Tennessee, they have a wonderful recovery district, for instance. That's made a big difference. Schools in New York have tried this before. Here, the way we tried it, though, had a lot to be desired, and that's pretty typical of us in Michigan right now. Is that even when we have a good idea, execution sort of eludes us in some really mind-boggling ways. And so the EAA turned out to not be, in my view, quite the catalyst it could have been, partially because of investment, partially because of planning. I think the secrecy that surrounded it was problematic. The difficulty is, so if you admit that the EAA didn't work, what's the solution? Do you send those schools, which had been failing? This is the thing people forget. Those schools have been failing for more than a decade inside DPS. So do you just send them back and say, well, good luck? I think the key is to think about all of the schools in Detroit, EAA, DPS, and charter, and start thinking about how we move them all forward. If you look at all the schools in Detroit and those three systems, none of them is doing that great. Overall, they're about the same. The kids in Detroit deserve better. Middle-class families will not move into the city until the schools offer better. We got to start thinking about them all together. And so we can fight about the EAA all we want, and whether it works or whether it doesn't. It was an idea to try to do something different, which I think is a step in the right direction. I'd rather keep moving that direction than talk about going back to something else. Do you think Dan Gilbert is good for the city? Well, I mean, I don't think he's bad for the city, let's say that. You know, I was born in Detroit and grew up there in the 1970s and 1980s. I can remember when downtown was the center of activity. You know, you go down there on a weekday, there were people coming and going from work and it was busy. On the weekends, you know, people shopped downtown and it was busy. I have never seen a city that was successful that didn't have that didn't have some form of that. Dan Gilbert is trying as hard as he can to restore some of that activity to downtown Detroit. I think it's odd somewhat, and this is a very Detroit characteristic, that we look at somebody who's doing something that he doesn't have to do at significant expense to him and wonder, well, what's his motive? Well, you know, what if his motive is to make money? Is that such a bad thing? I mean, since when is that problematic? Also, all he said he wanted to do was move his business downtown. I can remember this so clearly, the press conference he had, it was him and Kwame, remember that. What he said was, I'm going to move downtown, and he said, who's coming with me? He said, my goal is to get other businesses from outside the city to relocate downtown because we have got to rejuvenate this sort of central business district. Well, he's doing that. What I hear people criticizing him for is, well, you're not doing anything for the neighborhoods, or you're not doing anything about the schools, or you're not doing anything about the crime. I keep saying, well, that was never what he said he was going to do. He said he was going to solve one of our problems, and we have a lot of problems, and we should be focused on how we deal with those other things. But I think it's a little strange to snipe at the guy who says, he's the one guy I can think of who is doing exactly what he said he was going to do and is delivering. I think I get nervous because he now owns, I think, 100 or 120 buildings downtown. That's too much for any one person to carry. And, you know, if Dan Gilbert wakes up tomorrow and says, oh my gosh, this was a horrible mistake, I can't believe what I did, and pulls out, then we're right back where we were before. Now, I don't think he's going to do that, but there's a reason that we need more people participating, and we need more people saying, I want to get a building downtown and bring businesses in. So I do think he's a good thing for the city. I don't think he's the only solution, but it's a start. What hope do you have for the youth of Detroit? How can the building up of youth become as important as the building up of infrastructure in Detroit? That's a really good question, too. I have to think about that a lot more now because I have two children who live in the city and are growing up there. And I have to answer to their grandparents, right? My mom, whenever I talk to her on the phone, says things like, well, I would never do what you're doing. I would never raise kids in that city. And I said, yeah, but you did. I was there. I remember, I was there. But she has a real concern that things are so different now than they were in the 1970s and 1980s. And what I always remind her of is that, you know, this was not a garden spot then. Detroit was the murder capital of the world. Many years when I was a kid, and was all over the news for all the kind of violence that was going on and the sort of despair. I didn't, you know, that was not my experience as a kid in Detroit. I keep trying to tell her that that's not her grandkids' experience either, and that they're going to be fine. But I think it's a legitimate concern about your average kid in Detroit. What kind of opportunity do they have? I was talking in the speech about that neighborhood where I was born and how different it is. When I go there to plan the things that we're doing or think about the house, and I see kids, there are a lot of kids still in that neighborhood. The thing that strikes me is I was born there and had all this tremendous opportunity and got to the place where I am. I look at the kids there now and think, what chance do any of them have to have those same opportunities? It really is a different place. And I don't think it's rocket science to figure out the things that they need. They need safety, which for a lot of them is elusive. They need good schools. We have been fighting about education in Detroit for as long as I've been alive, and we haven't made any progress. Things are not better than they were when I graduated high school. They aren't better than they were 5 years ago when the state came in and said they were going to run the schools. I mean, nothing has moved the needle, and we got to get on top of that. I mean, that is the sort of chronic issue in my household. Where are these kids going to go to school? Right now, they're in a charter school that does very well. When they go to middle school, everything sort of drops off in Detroit in terms of performance and safety and the things that you want. That's for a lot of people, that's the reason to leave, and we got to sort of remove that. I think we are a long way from the point where we can say that your average kid in Detroit has the kind of opportunity in front of him or her that they should have. And what concerns me more is that we are more interested in fighting about what to do than we are in doing something that we know will make a difference. So no, I don't have a lot of hope for kids in Detroit, but I think we're all sort of working on that and thinking about ways to do better. And those are all the written questions. Are there any more? It is. It's big. I'm sure most people have seen the map that shows, I think it's Manhattan, San Francisco, and Boston all fit geographically into the borders of Detroit. The problem is not area, it's density, right? And it's serviceable density. And the city was built for an incredible density, almost 2 million people in that area, and now has, I guess, 600,000, 650,000. It's about matching the infrastructure and the service level to the density. And that's a really tough thing to do, because as you lose population, you can't just go and pull the sewers out of the underneath the road, or you can't just take down power lines. I don't think the city is going to ever be as dense as it was in 1950, or even maybe in 1970. But there are lots of cities that don't have that kind of density that do well. Atlanta is a good example of a city that's even larger than Detroit and has less density, but has figured out how to match the tax rate to the service level to the density that you have in the city. I mean, it's a very difficult thing to sort of manage over time, and you wish you could react quicker to population. I mean, the city lost population so fast and is still losing population so fast. I mean, we lost 250,000 people from 2000 to 2010. It's just an incredible rate. You can't adjust quick enough in terms of your service level and infrastructure to match that. So, I mean, it's a big question, but it's not just a matter of we have to shrink the city. I mean, because there's no practical way to do that. It's about making sure that that you maximize density where you have it, and that where there isn't density, you match the service level to fit that, so that you're not paying for infrastructure and services that nobody is using. The utilities have started to really think this through. DTE, for instance, knows that it's got all kinds of infrastructure that's got to be replaced, and not nearly the number of customers that it used to have. And so they're thinking very seriously about how to reduce their footprint, their infrastructure footprint. DWS, the water department, is in the same category, where you've got these massive infrastructure projects that are on the calendar, but they have to be calibrated to match the loss in population. That's how we'll start to see that work. Government will come, of course, more slowly behind that. I'm less worried about that problem in the long term than I am right now, where it results in deficit a lot of the time. But we'll figure that out over the long haul. He wants to know how we soften the conversation about sort of us versus them, sort of break down this barrier between Detroit and everybody else, and welcome people from the outside into Detroit to help fix things. First, I had to disclose that, last year I went on the Colbert Report, and I brought him a gift from Detroit as a joke. I gave him a sweatshirt, one of those Detroit versus everybody sweatshirts. So that's my feeling. This is sort of a long answer to the question. There are many reasons for the us versus them sort of dynamic in this region. Some of them legitimate, some of them not legitimate. But historically, we have not been very good at dealing with the legitimate reasons for it, right? The truth is that this region grew up around a set of inequalities that you just can't deny. The suburbs grew at a time the city was shrinking, and at a time that African Americans from the city were just not a part of it. By federal law, African Americans were prohibited from participating in the growth of this region and the economic growth of this region. And so the legacy of those de jure inequalities are de facto with us today. The first thing we gotta do is deal with that, right? Confront that in an honest way, and be upfront about what happened and why and what effect it has today. I think a lot of people, when they go into the city and feel that pushback about, well, you're an outsider, that's what's going through people's minds, and they probably wouldn't be able to quite articulate the history of it and all the detail, but that's what they feel, and that's how a lot of people in the city feel, like we were left behind. And so now you want to come in, and of course, the suspicion is you want to come in and take what's left and take it back to the suburbs. And of course, that's not the case. But I think going in with that up front and being able to sort of confront all of those things and be honest about it, it has the effect of disarming, I think, some of that resentment. I also think that the structure we have of hyper-local government here just makes that worse. We have too many divisions that tell us that if I cross this road, I'm over here. If I'm over here, if I'm on the other side of the road, I'm in another city. 8 Mile being, of course, the quintessential example of that. Government sets the tone in some ways for culture, and as long as we have those kind of governmental divisions, the culture is going to follow them. We got to do a better job of that as well. But also people in the city, I say this a lot, people in the city have got to stop assuming that we can solve all of our problems ourselves, or that all of our problems were caused by someone else. We have to sort of accept the idea that people coming in from the outside do want to help and do see this increasingly as a region and not a bunch of different sort of separate entities. But I think it does start with that confrontation of history, and I see people deny that all the time. That, oh, no, that's not what happened. Well, it is, and when you say it didn't happen, you're sort of adding insult to injury in a lot of people's minds about where the city is and where it's trying to get to. Sure. I'm sorry, you think what's more visible today than before? Racism. Yeah, well, I mean, it's, it's with us to stay. Yeah, I mean, I think, I'm not sure I would say it's worse now than it was before. I mean, there's a lot more opportunity for African Americans now than there ever has been. It's that the gulf between the top and the bottom is so profound that it is worse for the people at the bottom. It is worse. You still have people though who have been able to move through that gap despite the racial barriers. I always say that there are not great I don't think there are great solutions to racism. I think that's something that people feel, and that you're unlikely to change in terms of how people sort of react and think. I think that the goal is to set the rules so that that doesn't dominate, right? So it's okay for people to feel the way they do about blacks or whites or whoever, but let's have the rules be the same for everybody. And I think we've had a lot of progress in this country toward that, and we got a lot more work to do. Economics is also starting to take over for race, and it's a proxy in some ways, but it's also a very different dynamic. You talk about the gulf between wealth and poverty at this point, and the things that are being done in terms of policy that exacerbate that gulf. Tax structure and there are just lots of things going on that make it worse. That exacerbates the racial end of it because race is an accelerant and sort of an aggravator to economics, and so that makes it look worse too. I don't have any more answers than anybody else does about those things. I mean, I think you just keep plugging away at it and trying to make things fairer for everybody, and eventually it should work out. But I agree with you that it's pretty bad. This is a pretty racially charged region in some ways. Brooks Patterson just has to open his mouth, and people react. I mean, and this is a friend of mine who I keep telling, if you say things differently, you might get a different reaction. But, I mean, you look at how instantly people get their back up when he says what he says. There's a reason for that. I'm not sure how realistic it is that we'll just get over it at some point. He's asking about the Goldman Sachs program where they came in and worked with existing small businesses in the city about how to be better businesses, how to grow, and then they had an event at Wayne, I guess last month, was it? Yeah, it was recently they did to recognize the businesses that had come through, and then J.P. Morgan Chase has said they're going to spend, I think, $100 million or something in the city. I think those are great programs. The Goldman Sachs program in particular, I went to that ceremony. You looked at that stage, it was fully representative of this region, right? You had women, you had African Americans, you had men, you had people across every possible spectrum up on that stage who were business owners and who had participated in this program, and they will tell you to a one that it made a big difference for them. That's the kind of thing I think we definitely have to do more of, and it's the thing that we haven't done enough of in the past. The J.P. Morgan Chase piece, I think we still are waiting to see exactly what it is they want to do. I'm always skeptical of banks, especially after the last 12, 15 years. I would rather see them actually clean up some of the mess that they made in the foreclosure crisis in the city. A lot of those foreclosed houses were loans that J.P. Morgan either wrote or backed. Maybe that's their intent with some of this money, is to get after that. But it's, like I say, we need everybody at the table at this point. You can't be skeptical of anybody who's saying, look, I'm coming with some money in my pocket and I want to help. I think we have to, in Detroit, be much more welcoming of that than we typically have been. That's the last question. Okay. Well, thanks for having me.
Our YOU students are here, and they want to present Mr. Henderson with one of our, when you become a member of YOU, you get this awesome gift that we're sure he's not going to put in the box. And I'm going to see it on the news.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Henderson. We'd like to thank you for coming and for all the work you do, and we'd like to honor you with this U hoodie.
Oh, very nice. Thank you. Thank you. I'll take this to Stephen Colbert next time I go.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And notice it's not green.
It has some white.
Yeah, that's okay. That's all right. So, perhaps maybe Stephen Henderson, President 2016, huh? Listen, Again, I want to thank all of you for coming out on behalf of Ms. Judy Rubin, the board, and all of the staff. We would like to thank you for coming out and making our leadership breakfast spectacular. Again, we would like to thank Mr. Stephen Henderson for making our breakfast successful as well. And so I just want to close by saying have an amazing blue day.